call us to meet. I don't know if order is going to happen, but we'll try.
Very valid point, Lenny. Okay, so I just want to let everybody know that I'm gonna try to scoot out of here, or either get us done by 8 o'clock, or I'm gonna abandon the ship at 8 o'clock. Today's my son's birthday, so I have some celebrating to do a little later. So we're gonna let's aim for 8, and worst case, I'm gonna let Mary take over and run the show. So our consent agenda this evening has our minutes and a variety of policies. Is there any comments or motions that anybody wants to make?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mary. Questions, comments, complaints about the policies, folks? Okay. So all in favor of the consent agenda by roll, let's start with Lisa.
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Mary,
Yes.
Miranda,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
and has Emily joined us yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. Any updates to the schedule of our agenda?
No.
Okay. So then that brings us to visitors. I saw Caroline was on as our note taker, I'm assuming, and I know Northwest Access is here. We thank you for broadcasting. I sent all of the Northwest Access information to my folks in Arizona so they can watch my son play basketball that you guys are so kindly going to stream. When the time comes, they can actually play. I'll just give you guys a shout out that we so appreciate you offering this service to the folks that are watching us from home. And I was really impressed with the quality of the streaming service last week when they did a little sneak peek of a scrimmage that they offered. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then Morgan, are there any other visitors with us? I think not.
I don't see any.
Okay. So then let us move to our school spotlight tonight, which is Sheldon and Christy. The floor is yours.
All right. I would like to be able to share my screen if I can do that. Excellent. All right. All right. So I'm sharing some information about Number Corner, which is a piece of the Bridges math program. Sheldon has never used Bridges math, so the whole program is new to us, and we're doing a 2-year phase-in, and we began with grades 3, 4, and 5 this year, and next year kindergarten 1st and 2nd will join us using the Bridges program. But everyone's using Number Corner, so that was the toe in this year to be able to use Number Corner in all our classrooms. And that has been in my mind and a few other people, kind of an unexpected gem, right? Like we didn't know a lot about it. And so it's been fun getting to know about it and the outcomes we've seen. So what is Number Corner? This is what Number Corner looks like in the classroom. And if you went into a classroom, it wouldn't necessarily, every classroom wouldn't look exactly like this. But there's a whiteboard piece that has some of their number lines. There's the actual calendar part. There is calendar grid observations so they're able to track the observations they see, a calendar collector and record sheet, and just a portion of your classroom that is number corner. Now, in the past, we've seen teachers use this, and they usually call their kids down onto the rug, or have them, scoot their chairs over. And we're doing it from our seats a good distance away. So I think that there's teachers that'll be really even more excited about it when they can kind of get their kids in close and looking at it in a way that feels a little bit more together. So this is right from the Bridges math program site, the mathlearningcenter.org. There's lots of resources on there. And this is their definition of number corner, right? A skill building program. And the in for classrooms is really that it's designed around a classroom calendar. And so it's something that you look at every day for 15 to 20 minutes.
It's chilly. And what's it like out? Chilly. It's chilly. So that is the flag of Chile. Yep. Chile's down in South America. So I'm going to say the country is Chile. It's kind of like our flag. It's red and white and blue, right? It's got a star. But it doesn't have a bunch. But it doesn't have a bunch of red.
There's supposed to be 50. And it doesn't have stripes.
Nope.
One is 49.
So I want you to look at the flag.
That's a different flag.
Look at the flag. And I want you to think about this. Amount of red.
1 gallon to 1.
So there's 1 piece red.
Yeah, 1.
Go back to January. What did we talk about with the number on top of the number on the bottom?
Upstairs and
Fractions. Upstairs and downstairs numbers. Denominators and numerators. So if I'm looking at the amount of red on that flag, well, if you were only looking at that, that would be 1 to 1. But this whole rectangle is
4.
Is it 4 equal spots?
3 because the white and blue and red.
So it's 3 colors. What if I cut along the red? How much red would that be?
2.
I heard it.
Half.
Half. Yes. Half the flag is red. The other half of the flag is blue and white. Think of that. So you watch what I write here. Half equal red. So it's equal, right? Half and half. You okay with that?
Half equals red.
Yep, half equals red. The amount of red is it's equal to half. Did you hear what I just said? It's equal to a half, the amount of red. We didn't talk about the white and the blue, did we? No. We're only looking at the red. What if this part was red and this part was red? Would it be equal to half?
No.
No. Less than half?
More.
Greater than half? More than half? So that's kind of what we're thinking about. So that's the flag of Chile.
So that was Lisa Chaffee. She teaches 2nd grade. It was the first day of the month, so they don't know what the pattern's going to be, what they're even going to be talking about. And this is an introduction to fractions. So she mentioned that they had looked at that a little bit, but that they weren't necessarily really comfortable with talking about fractions yet. And this particular number corner sequence is going to track the amount of red in each flag. So we had a little geometry there, a little geography there too. So why number corner?
Chrissy, before you go on, can I just point out that that
Yep.
was also Lisa Chaffee, the FNESU Teacher of the Year for last year.
Yep, that is. And I just, just went in and she didn't know I was going to tape that, and she didn't set it up for me. I had told people I was going to do something about Number Corner and that I was going to be stopping in and looking for that in particular. So she wasn't surprised, but she also wasn't necessarily planning for me. So Number Corner has lots of, if you were able to hear enough of that conversation, you heard some very basic observations, and then you heard some more sophisticated observations of what they were seeing and predicting and imagining what might come next. And so it's a very low floor, high ceiling structure, right? So everyone can be involved in Number Corner, regardless of your mathematical understanding. Some students will look for the pattern, especially once they know what the pattern is, or they think they know what the pattern is, so on February 2nd, right, they would have looked for red, right? They would have been tuned into knowing that we're really looking at what's red on this flag. Other students are going to be able to make predictions about what might come next, but all students can participate in those activities. So I spoke to some of the math teachers and our instructional coach, Lori Boudreau, about Number Corner. So if some of this was their words, I either quoted it or just at least gave them credit. So this is Lindsay Canfield in grade 4. And what I really loved about her reflection about this is that, her 4th graders, once they see the repeating pattern in the grid, right, they get excited about that. And when there's a curveball, right, they really get excited. And sometimes that looks like frustration, and sometimes it looks like real excitement, but they're like, what happened? And that happens in a lot of the patterns, is that there's a curveball thrown. So.
I'm Sully Stebbins. I'm in 4th grade. Class off with Number Corner, and my favorite things about Number Corner are when my class tries to predict the calendar grid of the day, and I also like learning about fractions, decimals, and shapes.
So Number Corner is a routine in the classroom. It can be adjusted, so you can sometimes spend a little bit more time, spend a little bit less time, depending on what's going on that day. And there's lots of different parts to Number Corner as well. And grade 5, one of the things we realized is that by starting with grades 3, 4, and 5 with the Bridges Math program, there are some things that are set up along the way and that spiral through that program. And so our grade 5 students wouldn't have had those things necessarily, right? I mean, we're all teaching math and the curriculum is similar, but programs sometimes have specific strategies or specific vocab that they use, like Number Corner, for instance. And so there were a few things that were a little tricky for grade 5 as they tried to, navigate their way into Number Corner, including the fact that our grade 5 math teacher is brand new. And so grade 5, their focus has been on what's called problem strings. So problem strings are a carefully structured sequence of problems, and kids work on those and they start to notice the connections among those different problems and once they share how they solved them, they develop some more efficient ways of solving, right? So like they're really able to see the how math is a lot of structure and repetition, and maybe you don't see that when you look at problems in isolation, but when you put them together and then present those, you're like, wait a minute, those do the same things. So this is another one of our students.
In Number Corner, I love problem strings because you can use them as addition, subtraction, decimals, and fractions, and it makes adding and subtracting bigger numbers in like the hundredths and thousandths a lot easier. So you don't have to do all the borrowing.
That particular is looking at using a number line, so an open number line, and how when you are adding or subtracting, especially with a decimal or a fraction, maybe plotting something on a number line helps you see it more clearly. Oh, sorry. Bridget Enger-Kernan is one of our third grade teachers. Her third graders are very engaged in Number Corner, and there's lots of conversation. They do get really into like, what's it going to be tomorrow? What's it going to look like? And I was in there one day and a kid went up because they're already, the cards are already in the calendar and you just turn them over. And one kid went up and he was like trying to peek. So, oh, and when they miss a day, like, you know, they had a snow day yesterday. So they'll have, you know, 3 cards to turn over tomorrow. It has also become an important element of our MTSS, and we didn't realize that that was going to happen. So Sabrina Stebbins is our math interventionist, and you know, we knew that Number Corner was going to provide spiral review, and that it was going to, you know, continue to pick up things from all of our different units. But we didn't really think about the fact that it was going to pre-teach, so bring up, so like second grade doesn't really do fractions, but they're starting to talk about fractional and proportional reasoning. So it does pre-teaching, it does reteaching, right? So we continue to bring up concepts that we've learned along the way, and it does offer enrichment because there are enrichment activities that go along with Number Corner. And I know, for instance, that Lindsay in grade 4 sometimes uses those enrichment activities later during her math block for kids who finish quicker. It's also this year, right, providing students opportunities to catch up and review skills and concepts from last year. And so that's been an unexpected bonus. I kind of talked about this earlier, that Number Corner has a lot of different aspects to it: the calendar collector, the daily rectangle, and days in school, right? Tracks the number of days you've been in school, problem strings, computational fluency, and using the number line, and just general problem solving. Students look forward to making these connections, and they really get into that idea of predicting and finding patterns. This is what what a calendar looks like when it's all filled. This is again from the Bridges site. I could have taken a picture of one that was on the wall, but the reason I chose this to show instead is because it does throw in some extra resources, right? So it has literature connections. So if you want to pull out some books and use those during your read aloud time that are connected to the math concepts you're teaching, they're there for you. So Number Corner is just one more moment during the day, and it helps kids be flexible. It is sometimes very open-ended, and is a good focus on problem solving. And that's it.
Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome.
I'm wondering how many board members were trying to figure out the pattern of that last calendar. I was too.
Thank you, Christy. I so appreciate those little kid videos, like now that none of us get to be inside school buildings anymore. And I should also, I think you know this, Christy, but one of your 5th grade teachers sent me sent Mary and I a YouTube link to a little video that the students had created based on their kind of well wishes to the new president. And it was like the most wonderful thing I'd seen in a long time. So I'm so thankful that she sent that along, and she sent along her appreciation of the board. And I was like, yeah, you're doing the hard work. Don't thank me. We need to thank you. So I'm really glad she sent that along. It was great.
Did a really nice job. It did end up being in the messenger, and apparently it's going to be in 7 days too.
Very cool.
Not the video, but an article.
Okay, thank you, Christy. So that now brings us to you, Lynn.
So I'm panicking a little because my cursor just disappeared and I can't get it to, can't find it.
Try hitting escape and it might show up. No.
It's so strange. Something weird is going on. I'm wondering, Morgan, if you are queued up or if maybe the principals could go first, and let me keep working on this.
Yeah, you want me to go to the principal reports?
Would you? I'm gonna need my links.
Sure. Okay, so let's move to the principal reports, if that's okay with everybody. I'm gonna shut my video off because I know my internet is it's together with duct tape and baling twine in this neck of the woods, I think. Questions or comments or concerns for our principals about their reports?
I wanted to just mention I was really excited to see some of the grants that I know Sandy mentioned one in her report, and I believe also Christy at Sheldon. Those are so wonderful. I was especially just delighted about the snowshoes, Sandy. That's just wonderful.
Now finding someplace that has enough snowshoes for me to purchase is the next task.
Right. I'm sure a lot of these winter recreation items are hot ticket these days.
True.
I wonder if you were to reach out to
Rhoda,
oh, sorry, Jean Marie.
No, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I can't remember, Sandy, there's that snowshoe company. They used to be based out of the Stowe Morrisville.
Cubs.
Yeah, are they still down there? And
Not sure, but they're on my list. And Garno, it's a sporting goods company in Newport or Derby.
yeah, yeah, if going directly to the manufacturer, if you're trying to buy like a bulk order like that, they might be, might be able to get a better deal for you directly. And I don't know, they may even have programs that they offer discounts for schools and such.
Absolutely.
Sandy, I'm going to send you a link to a little company I found in New York State that actually makes snowshoes there. I just bought myself a pair. I don't know what they'll do for schools, but I'll send it to you.
Great, thank you.
Jean Marie, did you have a question for me?
Yes, I'm sad to see that we've lost our science teacher again.
Yes, me too. Me too. Yeah, he reached out a couple weeks ago now and just said that he's planning on staying in New Hampshire. So we're on the search again.
Yeah, bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or concerns for our principals?
I'm excited to hear about the greenhouse.
Okay, so then. Yeah, there was, thank you for sharing the good news in there. It's so good to read that stuff in there. I appreciate that. Lynn, are you ready for us to go back to you, or Morgan says he's ready to go if you aren't?
So it depends on if I cannot control my computer at all. I've completely lost my cursor and things are lighting up, but I just don't have any control. So if he can project for me.
I'm going to project for Lynn. Just give me a second to get it rolling here.
Looks like Emily has just jumped into the waiting room to Morgan.
Okay, let me take care of that. Yep, Emily's on her way in.
Hey, Emily.
Sorry I'm late. I totally messed the time up.
No worries. Okay, so Morgan, are we good?
We're good.
Okay, so if you could go to the next slide. So we're going to start first talking about personnel. And there are a couple of places where you're going to need to take action. You've already talked a little bit about Caleb Shaw resigning from Bakersfield. So he's under a teaching contract, so you will need to take action on accepting his letter of resignation. And Beverly Alexander, a longtime consumer science and design technology teacher at Berkshire, she actually retired several years ago, and it was very evident that she really was not ready to retire, and so she spent a long time with us and just been doing fantastic work in Berkshire. So both Caleb and Beverly will be sincerely missed in both of those school communities. So those are your two action items under personnel, if you want to start with those.
Sure. Does somebody want to make a motion regarding those two resignations?
I'll make that motion to accept resignations from Caleb Shaw and Beverly Alexander.
Thank you. Lisa?
Aye.
Kat? Gotcha. John?
Aye.
Mary?
Yes.
Miranda?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And Emily?
Aye.
Thank you.
It should probably be reflected in the minutes that Caleb's resignation is effective at the end of the year and Beverly's was effective at the end of last week, January 28th. The rest thank you. The rest under personnel is informational. You had one other resignation. We hired a paraeducator in Montgomery, and we still are looking for paraeducators in both Bakersfield and in Sheldon. Ready for the next one, Morgan? Nothing under student at this time. I will say, you know that Courtney puts together the pictures in my slideshows for these board meetings, and she had so much fun with the posting yesterday for the snow day and all the pictures that people posted about what they were doing on the snow day. She told me when I saw her today, all your pictures are those snow day pictures from yesterday. So we got some great stuff from the community. Ready for the next one? So I want to talk a little bit about COVID response and where we are with the work we're doing around COVID. The first thing I want to talk about is the return to more time for in-person learning. So that's something that the leaders and I have had our eye on for a while. We began leaning into the idea of 6th grade when the health and safety guidance changed back in, I want to say late October, early November. So we had some discussions about getting 6th sixth grade. Ah, sorry about that. We had some discussions at that time about starting to lean in and return those sixth graders. And then we had the uptick that happened after Halloween, and then another uptick after Thanksgiving. And that's when we started seeing positives. So we halted at that time. And I really didn't bring that back into the conversation until January. And we started talking about, are we ready? Can we fit our sixth graders at 3 feet? And so we were waiting for when we felt like the virus counts were down to start getting ready to do that again. I feel like one of the missteps that I made was in not making that timeline decision a week earlier, or not pushing the return a week later, because I know that that felt like a shock to some parts of the system. I think even to some parents. So the intention was good there to try to get kids back, because we know that it's important for kids to get back to more time in learning. But I really wish in hindsight we had changed the timeline a little bit. So from that discussion, we started talking about the rest of middle school and is there a way? So you remember from the health and safety guidelines, the 7th and 8th graders actually require 6 feet of distance between them. So when we first were looking at that, we weren't imagining that there was any way forward for 7th and 8th to return to more time in person. And we've tried to make our decisions pretty in sync with one another in terms of opportunities within all 6 of our schools being really similar. So for this, at this point, we had a couple of schools that were saying, but we could do it. We have enough space in our programs. So Montgomery was able to manage 6th through 7th and 8th grade at 6 feet by reorienting those classrooms. So those students returned this week. So Montgomery has 6 through 8 back. And then another school in the other district, Richford, is able to bring 6 through 8 back at that distance. So they have a timeline that'll be coming at, I think, right after the February break. For the rest of our schools, we still haven't found a path forward for all of the 7th and 8th to come back. We're working hard. I know both Christy and Lenny and Rhoda are looking at the distancing, and they're trying to be really creative about, are there other spaces that we can use, including spaces like gym spaces, to open that up for classrooms. So I think that both Sheldon and Berkshire are getting closer to that, and we're still not quite there space-wise in Bakersfield, but we're keeping our eye on how do we continue to navigate that hope of getting more kids back for more time in person. There are conversations happening around winter sports planning, and I know that that is a big question for anybody that has a 7th and 8th grade basketball player in any of our FNESU schools. I do think that we are going to be able to have a 7th and 8th grade season. The principals have been working on it for a while. I asked them to slow that timing down so we could see the high school start and how the high school sports start was. We're 2 weeks into the start of the high school program at this point. I'm expecting that we're going to get an update on Friday about winter sports at the press conference. I'm not certain, but I'm expecting that we might. We're getting ready to shift into rolling out the plan for winter sports. The tricky part for us is not all of our gym spaces are available. So what that's going to require is some shared usage of different gyms. And in order to have enough kids to actually play in some of our towns, because the numbers are so low, we will have to combine some of our towns to be able to create a team like we did for soccer. So we're not certain yet about timeline. We have a tentative thought that maybe we could go right before the start of the February break, but we're keeping our eye right now on positivity rates that are close to our school environments. We have some community outbreaks in some of our towns that we're keeping a really close eye on.
Lynn, I think you're blocking your microphone with your hand or something.
I was touching something over there. So did you hear that last part? What was the last thing you heard me say?
Outbreaks in our community.
Outbreaks in the community. So we're going to reassess based on what we find out, what happens with those situations that we're watching and whether or not they're going to impact our schools any more than they have. And if that turns out okay, we're going to be ready to move forward with middle school sports. If not, if we need to pause for a little bit longer, we will. We're going to make sure that, you know, the circumstances are ripe for us to return to that. But the long story short is that as long as it's allowable, we're going to find a path forward for that. The next piece that we're going to be leaning into is the recovery planning. So we had the planning we did after closure in the spring. We had a couple of different plans we had to write, one for maintenance of learning and then one for continuity of learning. And then we had a reopening plan. And now we're shifting into that next phase, the recovery plan. So we're expecting any day to receive a template from the Agency of Education that's going to outline the requirements that we have to meet in terms of planning for the recovery. So one of the things I think it's important for you to know as a board is that our recovery from this pandemic is going to take us multiple years. It's not going to be something that we're going to fix over a summer. We're going to focus our attention both on learning with students and social emotional learning. I think that one of the things that has happened because of the circumstance we've been under with the virus is that engagement has been tricky for some of our kids. And that could have to do with the virtual learning pieces, what everybody's dealing with the pandemic and many other factors. So a big part of our recovery plan is going to be about re-engaging our learners and then really leaning into our local assessment plan and other assessment tools to be able to measure what is the learning loss that we're looking at with our students, and then working together to create a plan for how we can respond and how we can accelerate learning for the FNESU students. So one of the things that I think I'm assuming I can see on my screen for board members, John, I can see you. Did you all receive from the Vermont School Boards Association the most recent legislative update report? Yes. So within that, you got an overview of the type of funding resources that are coming our way to public schools. So we have a pretty substantial amount of recovery money that is going to come our way. So part of our planning is going to be about how we utilize those financial resources to accelerate learning and re-engagement for our students. So that's the crux of what we know. We know that in our recovery plan, we're going to have to be looking at 3 priorities. One is mental health and well-being. The second is re-engagement and truancy. And the third is academic proficiency. So that's the context of that. You'll be hearing in the coming months, I'm sure, connections to that recovery plan from us. One of the things that I do know that the agency is going to expect of us is that we're looking at the plan that we write every year around how we're going to use our consolidated federal grants. And they're also going to be looking at the continuous improvement plans that we write for our schools. And they're going to expect there to be a really strong connection between our recovery plan, that continuous improvement plan, and how we're spending our consolidated federal grant money and the kind of strategies that we're writing there. So the principals and I have a lot of work to do in the next few months. We're still waiting to see that template, and we know that it's going to be due in April. So we're under 8 weeks away from when that's going to be due back to the agency. So we're eager to see it get started. Any questions on COVID? Anything COVID related?
I did have a question, Lynn. It's been bouncing around in my head for the last few days about like the AOE acting to adjust the number of required school days this year. Has that been done?
Yeah, it was done in the fall.
It was done. Okay. I remembered us talking about it, but I didn't remember there being action on it. So, and as with the snow day, I was like, oh, I have no idea when you guys will be done
Yeah.
school.
We use, when he pushed the start of the school year back, we used those days, as did all other schools in the state, for professional development for teachers. And the legislature made the decision in the fall that they're not going to require, for this year, there'll be an exemption from the 175-day minimum. So this year's minimum is 170 days. So we won't have to make up those 5. We will have to make up yesterday. There is one.
Gotcha. Thank you.
One more thing I guess I want to share, because some questions have come up about how is it in some of the cases that we have been dealing with in our schools that they're not at school during the infectious period. So I think it would be helpful, not sure how many people watch these board meetings, would like to think a lot. I just want to talk about that for a second. So in some cases, when a family member is a close contact to someone who's positive, the kids stay home with the family member. So they're out of school for a while. And if there's a positive in the family, there has to be kind of an incubation period before the child then becomes contagious, before they're infectious. So in a lot of the cases, they know of a connection. So kids are already out and already staying home. And so by the time they're positive or they're exhibiting symptoms, they already haven't been in school for a very long time. So I think that part people get tripped up on a little bit. And I chose in the beginning to communicate differently to our community than what we were told we had to do. So one of the things that the Department of Health told us in the beginning is school cases are considered cases when a person is infectious at school. And we chose to communicate more broadly than that because we have such small communities. I did not want there to be a perception that I was withholding information from the community. So if there is any case that is positive, that's connected to any of our schools, we're communicating about it. And we're making sure that we say that whether or not that individual has actually been at school while they were infectious. And if that's the case, we identify close contacts and those people quarantine. If they haven't been, then there's no need for us to identify close contacts because they weren't present. So I think there's good and bad to that. I think that the good is that it's totally transparent. Everyone is seeing when there are positives. I think the bad to that is that I communicate a lot. And I think that sometimes it's frustrating to see the communications and then wonder how that's so if they're not at school while they're infectious in so many of the cases. So does anybody have any questions about that?
I had a question about returning to more in-person learning. Is there any talk about like Wednesdays, whether it be the younger kids returning to Wednesday or the older kids that there isn't space for, like upping them to Wednesdays, or is that anything that's even a part of the scope at this point?
So it's not actually at this point, Catherine, because of the work that we're doing this year. We feel really strongly that we need that intervention time for those students in the morning. And there's so much on teachers right now to be able to navigate this kind of a learning model and the response that we have during the pandemic that if we take Wednesday away, we can't meet the planning obligations in the master agreement just because it's really complicated. But to give you just kind of a high level overview, even how we have to use staff on an in-person day, because you don't have cafeterias anymore where kids can kind of all come together and you can have a handful of people supervising. Now everybody's supervising. So those periods of time where teachers used to have time to plan during the week are much smaller than what they've had in the past. So Wednesday is really critical for that prep and that planning, and also for the teacher collaboration and the professional development meetings that are happening in the schools. So I don't see us going back to Wednesday this school year. Any other questions on COVID? Okay, Morgan. So this next part is an overview. The SU board gave the go-ahead for us to continue the work of the Portrait of a Graduate, with the intention of, the hope is that we have a committee that's now working. Can you click on that link? We have a committee that's now working on this Portrait of a Graduate work, and the intention is, if the board approves this in April, the Portrait of a Graduate would become our graduation requirements. That would be the guiding light, what we want all of our pre-K-12 students to be working on in their journey towards graduation. So we've re-engaged with this work. As you know, we paused last spring when COVID hit, and we were right at that place where we were ready to get teachers engaged with the Portrait of a Graduate and start getting some educator feedback. So we just started today with a discovery work group. We've hired Wendy Baker to help us follow this through to the end. She's been the consultant that worked with the students. So that discovery work group met today for the first time, and their task between now and April is to grapple with this driving question of what might it look like to align all pre-K-12 FNESU-wide curriculum and proficiency work with the draft of the FNESU Portrait of a Graduate characteristics. So they're working through all of that. They're looking at the draft that the kids came up with. They're looking at the proficiencies that we currently have. They're looking at the Vermont Portrait of a Graduate, and they're going to come back in April with some recommendations. Can you go down a little, Morgan? At that April board meeting, they're going to present to the board what they think, if they're looking at our system, what are some of the things within our system that would be easy alignments. And they're going to recommend any amendments that they think need to be added to that Portrait of a Graduate draft. And any substantial shifts that might have to happen within our system in order to really truly turn that into our graduation expectations. So we don't really need to look at the structure piece. If the SU board in April says, yes, we're good, then we convene a discovery work group, and that's a team of just right people that will take the recommendations from that implementation team, and they'll put them in action. They'll be working through the spring and through the summer. They'll be breaking out into subcommittees to review all of the things that we need to do, and they'll be developing what I'm expecting will turn into a multi-year plan for rolling out the Portrait of a Graduate work. And we're hoping to get started with at least some of it in the fall of 21-22 is the goal. We do know it's a tight timeline, and there's a lot to do between now and then. And if at some point we look at it and think, okay, maybe this is not attainable, we know that we need to go back to the board and say, we're going to not pause, but we're going to need more time. But this is the goal for now as we move forward. So I'm wondering if anybody has any questions about the Portrait of a Graduate. Okay. There was a little more shared at the SU board meeting. So if any of you wanted some more information about the Portrait of a Grad work, you could take a look at the January SU board meeting, and there's a section in there about that. I'm ready for the next one, Morgan. So I'm not going to go through the entire legislative update, but there are a couple of things that are happening in the legislature that I would like to just make you aware of. So in the, you know, from what you've seen from VSBA that, and what we've talked with you about the flexibility around annual meeting, that all passed through the legislature. I think that we are already good what we had been thinking about our annual meetings. It looks like it's going to work fine. There's not anything that I think changes our plan. Do you, Morgan? Do you think that passing changes anything about our plan for annual meeting?
I do not. I think we're set to move forward as advertised.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that? We received a survey from Courtney the other day. Did we ever come to a conclusion when this is going to be?
The board retreat? No, are you talking about the board retreat, Lisa?
No, I'm actually talking about,
The informational Zoom.
Oh,
yes.
Yes, we have decided for your side, and I believe it's February 25th. And I will just confirm that when I'm not screen sharing anymore.
so we can send that message out to confirm with all board
Yeah.
members too.
And is that different from another date that we had already, I think Courtney asked you this question, but there were other board members that were weighing in that were also confused. There was a February 17th date.
So originally, you had planned on having your in-person meeting on February 17th, and that's roughly the same day of the week that it was the last year. When you moved your voting to town meeting day, we needed to have a separate informational meeting within 10 days of town meeting day. And so we couldn't keep that February 17th date. If we go back to normal next year and you want to still elect those couple of positions from the floor, we would go back to that original schedule.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last sentence? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Sure. So the move for electing your moderator and your clerk on town meeting day this year is only a 1-year pass in statute. So presumably if things go back to normal, next year you would elect those two positions and do your non-binding business again from a floor meeting, which would be in that mid-February date.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't hear you say next year. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm still confused. So the 17th is out and the 25th is in. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Another piece that's going through the legislature, and I know, Lisa, this is from your committee on statewide bargaining for school employee health benefits. And there are 2 different bills that are going through right now. And I know, Morgan, you did more work on this than I did, but one of the big differences is in the House 63, H63 version, that if the negotiation requires an arbitration, that the panel can consider reasonable. They can appropriately balance access to appropriate healthcare benefits and reasonably consider cost containment to ensure the financial sustainability of the plan. And that's a little different than what it says in H81. So, so this is one to pay attention to. Morgan, you want to talk at all about, I don't know how, probably not much depth about the side-by-side differences, but why this is so important for board members to tune into.
Sure, and this is going through House General right now. I tuned into a little bit of the discussion, and it strikes me that it's going to be quite a long one. But there's several changes to the Healthcare Commission that are proposed in one or both of these bills. Generally, the VSBA, so-called VSBA bill, is more favorable to boards, and the other bill is more favorable to the union. I think one of the big differences, as Lynn pointed out, is whether an arbitrator is going to be allowed or encouraged to look at the cost of the different proposals to boards and to taxpayers. I think that without that, and this is my personal take, without that that in there, there's very little incentive for the union side to come to an agreement during the initial steps of that process. So to come to a negotiated agreement rather than just plan on the process ending in arbitration. And I think we saw that in the negotiations last year. I don't think anybody was surprised that this first round was going to end up in arbitration rather than at a negotiated settlement. And I think generally, if we can come to a settlement in that first stage of the process, it's going to be better for you. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add anything to that based on your perspective, because you've certainly had to listen to a lot more of that than I.
Yeah, you're correct on that, because that is my committee that I sit on. And there are some differences in terms of who sits on the commission and who would be part of the arbitration panel between the two bills. But one of them really is a union-driven bill, and the other one is a school boards-driven bill. And the main difference that I see is around the percentages and the percentages of premium that different classes of employees would pay, as well as their out-of-pocket costs. So if anybody wants to reach out to me and discuss this in much greater depth, I've listened to a lot of testimony on it, so I should be able to speak to you about it, but it's pretty complex and we are getting really far down into the weeds right now on it. We've spent a number of hours already in the last 10 days on these two bills. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody if you want to reach out to me.
I think that one of the other pieces that stands out to me, Lisa, first I should say I appreciate that if people could reach out to you, I think that would be helpful. One of the pieces that stands out to me is how much health insurance drives our budgets. And when you look at Morgan's pie charts on your budget packets, and you look at how much of your budget has to do with salary and healthcare, and you look at what portion of that pie is healthcare, it's pretty substantial. So the impact of these increases in the healthcare costs each year upon year, where we have this pattern of double-digit increases. We're just under this year, but it just has a tremendous impact on your local budget and ultimately your per pupil spending. So that's an important part of the discussion.
Yes, that's very important. And what we're seeing, we did get some fiscal analysis on it, and we're seeing that it's already cost the state around $25 million in the extra in this last round of negotiations. And that can only go up as the commission is allowed to bargain the number of hours an employee needs to work to be eligible for health care, and or whether they can accept a family plan versus a single plan, which is something that happened this year, that people who previously only qualified for a single person plan now can take a family plan. So all of those costs go directly into our budget and are passed down directly to taxpayers. And the only way to not do that is to cut services and programming, which is something we really don't want to do. But as school board members, we also have to be very mindful of the cost to our taxpayers. So it's really a very fine line. I've gotten literally hundreds of emails from both sides on this, and I truly understand people's concern for especially someone who might not be making a very high wage to have to pay a lot for healthcare. And I have a lot of sympathy for that, but it's something that most of us grapple with as well. You know, even in the private sector, healthcare is very, very expensive. So not to be on a soapbox about that, but please feel free to reach out to me if you have any concerns. Thanks.
Another piece of legislation to watch is the pupil weighting study. I think I may have, I'm not sure if I talked to this board about it. I definitely talked to the SU board about it. I think that there is some significance to the weighting study. The intention there is to re-weight. So you know how you get the equalized pupil count every year and how that drives your budget. So not every child is counted in the same way. So if you're a child who lives in poverty, you're weighted a little more than a child who doesn't live in poverty. If you're an English language learner, or if you're in special education, or if you're a high school student, all of those garner greater weights as you're counting students. Preschool has less weight than an elementary student. So those weights haven't been adjusted in more than 20 years, and there's a proposal to adjust those weights. So there is, it's going to be a challenging bill because the impact of the weighting study, it will affect different communities differently. Morgan and I have looked at the study that was done out of UVM, Tammy Colby's work, and it looks like for NMV, you would come out pretty neutral in terms of where you would land. Correct, Morgan? It's been a little while since we've talked about this. There would be a significant change on the ER side where the weights, because of poverty and other factors, they would ultimately have a significantly higher number of equalized pupils, which would have a dramatic impact on resources and revenue for them. So the challenging part is there's no more money, like there's just that one pot of money. So if they get significantly higher weights, other communities would get significantly lower weights. So that will play out differently across the state. The intention behind that is to think about equity and think about the spending plans that some communities can get approved by their voters, and how the capacity to approve spending plans is different in one area versus another area, and how much those communities will support some of those opportunities. So it's worth watching, and I think that it's very important work. I'm not certain how they'll land on it. I think that ultimately there's going to need to be some sort of a multi-year approach to getting this done, is what my instinct tells me. But the intention is to really focus on equity for communities and access to more opportunities for kids. So there's some work about excess spending threshold, and when you know how when we look at that chart that has all the lines that Morgan gives you, it's going to be on your mailer this year. I know he showed it to you. We're really low on the per pupil, like how much we spend per pupil compared to some of those other communities that are really high. Well, there's a line somewhere in that continuum that's a threshold, and if communities are spending more than that threshold per pupil, there's a financial disincentive for that. So there are two bills pushing, actually more than two bills, but they're pushing to try to exclude the costs of healthcare and or exclude the cost of capital construction projects from accounting in your equalized pupil spending. So it'll be curious how that turns out. Of particular importance to all of you is H80. This is something that I if there's anything, right, I mean, all of it is important. This for FNESU is really significant. So under H80, last year was in legislative session, last year was H805. This would allow a teacher to sign a contract with us and then continue to look for work in other places and be released from that contract to accept a job somewhere else. So we have staffing shortages that we battle every year. So I just want to play this out, how this, if this gets passed, how this could look at FNESU. We have staffing shortages where we're trying to hire, and our pool of candidates is not very big. And so these principals work very hard to hire teachers, get them locked in, and then they're planning for their year. So there's that piece. And then there's also the staff you already have. So we offer contracts in the middle of April. They have a couple weeks to sign their contract. So beginning of May. If they're looking for work, they can request 2 extra weeks. So that gets you to the middle of May. And at that point, they either have to sign their contract or we open the position. There's no choice in between. And once they've signed, I don't release them from their contract. They've committed. There have been extraordinary circumstances where someone's family has gotten, maybe they're stationed somewhere else, or they've had to move for an ill family member or something. So extenuating circumstances, but we generally don't let them out of their contract. So if you play this out and we've got what we think is our known workforce in the middle of May, principals finalize all of their hiring end of May, beginning of June. And then in July or August, we have, even if it's 2 teachers from each building who say, I just got a job in Chittenden County, you now are going to have 2nd grade positions open in one building and 5th grade positions open in another, maybe a high school position in another. And your leaders are going to be faced with no candidates at that point in the summer, because the candidate pool, even during the hiring season, is small, and it's almost non-existent by the time you get to the end of summer. People have already accepted their position. So if this passes and people are allowed to do this, we're going to not be in a great place in terms of workforce. And I'm very worried about this bill. So this is actually one you'll see. I'll be testifying on this bill.
Lynn, can I ask you a quick question? Those in favor of this bill, what is their justification or kind of reasoning behind it, their support of it?
I can't really speak for them, and I haven't read any testimony, Mary, but I think the crux of it is that the employees should have the flexibility to decide at any point where they want to work.
Lynn, I can speak to this because H805 was in my committee last year, and I heard a lot of testimony, hours of testimony about it. So Mary, the entities that are in favor of this, yes, it is another union-driven bill, and they're not shy about saying that, so I'm not revealing any secrets here. But it is generally approved by school districts that have a typically large number of applicants in their applicant pool anyway. They're not all Chittenden County, but they are the larger metropolises of Vermont who have a big pool to choose from. And they don't see this as a problem if teachers were to sign a contract and, or actually they were going to give teachers until, oh gosh, I think it was the beginning of June, maybe, to sign their contracts. They didn't see this as a problem because they knew they could always get somebody else if that teacher didn't sign their contract, the current teacher that they had in that position. So it's a different animal than what we see up here. I had a lot of conversation with people. I always have a lot of conversation with people trying to get them to see what it's like to live and work in northeastern Franklin County. The majority of the state doesn't really understand the way things work here. So I spend a lot of my time explaining what it's like to be here.
I think that you'll hear from other superintendents too, who also struggle. I think we tend to be across the northern border where we can't draw any candidates from above us at all. We lose that whole, half of our circle. And I do think that there are some other remote, maybe eastern side of the state that also really struggle. I think we tend to be those organizations who end up on the agency's identified list as having the most provisional licenses for educators in the state. We're always right up there. I cut somebody off, I'm sorry.
You're good. I was going to basically just point that out, that I have to think there's a lot of other areas of Vermont, the Northeast Kingdom, and some other, a lot of other very rural pockets that are in the same boat as us. So I just can't believe that. Yeah, I just think it would absolutely change the whole structure and integrity of the system and the education job pool. So I hope this doesn't happen.
Any other questions on that? I think that I'm almost done, I swear. There's a recommendations the legislature is going to have to consider on the pension liabilities for teacher retirement. Treasurer Beth Pierce has made some recommendations about how to rectify the situation that we're in, where there is a significant shortfall in funding for our teacher retirement system, and it's in trouble. So there's going to need to be some action. I'm not sure what that action is going to be. Some of the things that they're considering are changing the rules for the people who are not currently retired. So taking, making some adjustments on how their compensation at retirement would be determined by, it's a certain number of years your highest pay divided by 3 right now. And they're considering changing that divisor. And they're also considering making some changes to increase the amount that people are spending or paying towards their retirement. And I think the biggest thing that people are struggling with and thinking about the recommendations is they're also considering making a change so that there's no cost of living increase for anyone when you retire. Once you retire, that would be your compensation for as long as you are in that retirement system. So there are lots of things. I'll be curious to see how they take that up in Montpelier. Lisa, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Lynn, I'm glad you brought that up because this has been a topic of discussion and also many letters that all of us in the legislature have gotten. And I'd like to take this opportunity just to clear up one little piece of misinformation. And that is that the only proposal right now on the table is the recommendation by the state treasurer, Ms. Pierce. And the legislature has not formulated a plan, nor has the administration formulated a plan to either counter her suggestions or go along with her suggestions. So nothing right now is even quote unquote in the legislature. It's all a proposal by Treasurer Pierce, and it will come up eventually that the money committees in the legislature will talk about it because it's pretty unsustainable the way it is now. Just in the last year, we've had to add another $196 million to the pension funds just over the last year to cover our costs. And that doesn't even begin to start to dig us out of the hole that we're already in. And the hole was really developed because it's been many, many, many years that the funds were underfunded and underperforming. So I just want to make that clear right now that pretty much everything is on the table right now and nothing is on the table because no one is debating it in committee at this moment or even voting, or certainly not voting on anything at this moment. But there is some misinformation out there that the legislature has this plan and is going to enact it. And that couldn't be farther from the truth because the legislature does not have a plan right now, except for we know that something's got to change. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, I apologize if I started it that way. That wasn't my intention.
No, that's fine. It comes from all the letters that I've gotten. So thank you.
Treasurer Pierce is very clear that these are her recommendations, that there may be other recommendations and other ways that they can go at this. But I think that the important thing to just pay attention to is that the timeliness that she is suggesting that we need to lean into this as a state because it affects the teacher retirement system and the state employee retirement system too, correct, Lisa? It's both of those.
Yes.
So it's just big stuff that's going through there. And that's really all I wanted to talk through about the legislative update. Did anybody have anything else in what they read or what I talked about that they wanted to ask or discuss? If I see that H80 bill come forward, I will, if we see that speed up, I'll reach out to all of you in case any of you want to comment on that. Morgan, I'm ready for you to go to the next one. So I didn't know, Morgan and I did not really talk before we wrote the report. So meeting preparation and timeline, are you going to do that under yours, Morgan?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll skip that one. And the last thing I'm going to just mention to you is, we'll talk about mailer under yours. You can go to the next slide. Teacher negotiation. So I brought to you, I asked you last time your thoughts on teacher negotiation. It's looking like the union and the SU board are going to try to work together to make a plan. I don't know how much I can say. I'm looking at Morgan on the screen. They're going to try to work together to make a one-year plan to move forward. So we should have an update for you. I think by your March meeting, you'll have an update. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Morgan, are you ready for us?
Sure, I am. So in my reports, I mentioned that we still don't have an audit draft, and that has not changed. I have not sent your January report out yet, but I will do that in the next few days. Going back to your FY22 budget, I put in the report that in the information that we put in the town books, which had to go to printers a week and a half ago, let's say, I decided to use a yield amount of $10,998 as opposed to the tax commissioner's number, which is the one that we had discussed at your last meeting. The reason for this is that very few of my colleagues across the state decided to go with the tax commissioner's number. None of us believed it, and most seemed to be going with the $10,998 because that's the number that we ended up at last year. And the signals that we were getting from the folks who would give us signals was that the $10,998 was at least a safe number to include. We've since seen a yield bill in the legislature start working its way through the process. I'm going to try to quickly find the number for that for anyone who cares to track that. It is H152. The yield number that's kicking around in that is 11,385, which is obviously significantly higher than the number that we've already gone to the publishers with and that the tax commissioner had put out there. In your budget, a move of about $85 on the yield moves your tax rate by about a penny. So while these $300, $400, $500 moves may not seem like a lot, they actually have a pretty significant impact. So I'm going to do a couple of screen shares, and I'm sorry, going to pop back and forth, so you might get a little motion sickness from it. So on your screen now, you see the version of the budget that you're familiar looking at. And this is showing the 10,998 yield rate. And what that generates is a tax rate before the CLA of $1.4160. So that's the number that is going out in your town books. If the house number makes it through, and right now that bill is in House Ed, so it has a little while still to go before it gets to the Senate and the governor. But if you look at the screen now at 11,385, it drops that tax rate down to $1.3707. And so your increase over the prior year, and again, this is before the CLA, is less than a penny, which is significantly different than the 8 cents that we were talking about a month ago and the 5 cents that I was planning coming to you tonight and talking about. So at this point in time, these are the numbers that I would use on that mailer that goes out, and any information that we put out on social media or that we have available for the informational meeting. So I wanted to tip you to that. If this 11,385 number gets different after it goes through House Ed and the full House floor, I will use that. And basically what I'll end up doing is using the number that seems most credible the day before Dorian tells me that we have to send these out to your voters. But right now it's at that 11,385, which gives you basically a flat tax rate. While I've got this up, I got a letter today, and I don't know, Jean Marie, if you got a copy of it as well. You were officially CC'd on it, but I don't know where these actually go. But the chair of the select board of Berkshire Town apparently is contesting the statewide assessment. And so that Berkshire CLA figure conceivably could change at some point in the next few months, depending on how that appeal goes. I've never seen how that process works, so I can't put a prediction in, but that would only change the number for Berkshire Town itself, and it would only change the CLA. So now that we're a unified district, the tax rate that we try to talk about and need to get used to talking about would be unchanged by that appeal. But I just wanted you to know about that in case any board members hear about it, especially John or Lisa. And I was just curious, Jean Marie, if you had gotten a copy of that letter. And if you haven't, do you want me to send you a copy?
Can you explain that a little more too, Morgan?
Did you get it in like the regular postal mail or via email?
I found it on my chair when I came in tonight for the meeting. So it came in by postal mail.
I like to refer to this town as Petticoat Junction, so give me another day and I'll let you know if I got it.
And I can scan it to you tonight. Lisa, to answer your question, I don't know much about it other than the state does their study, and the data in that study is what sets the CLA and the coefficient of dispersal or dispersion, the other number that matters to towns. And there is a process for towns to contest those figures. And for whatever reason, Berkshire is contesting theirs. So I would speculate that they think the sales numbers that were used were not an accurate indication of what's going in town, but I would really be wandering pretty far away from my wheelhouse.
So you don't know whether they're contesting it up or down. They think it's too much or too little. You don't know any of that.
Right, and it's kind of interesting since theirs is the only one that went up, which helps their tax rate. So I was a little bit surprised to see that that was the town that contested it.
Thank you.
Yep. So are there any questions on that yield number and how that's going to impact the information that we put out to your voters? Okay. So you all did get a survey from Courtney about times available for the informational meeting. And again, we have a 10-day window where we have to hold that meeting, and it will be held by Zoom. The date that we settled on for the NMV side is February 25th at 6 o'clock. We'll probably book it for 2 hours. It's hard to predict if this will see more or less attention than in meetings. And so it's hard to know whether these are going to go shorter or longer. But we will be prepared to talk about the budget. Anyone who's running for a board seat should be prepared to introduce themselves at that meeting. Although I have seen the ballots and all the ballot races have only one candidate. So we're not expecting any surprises or nail biters on town meeting day for any of the seats. I will have the usual handouts ready for that to share. I don't know if there is anything in particular that any of the board members would like to see before that. I do also know that the chair of the Enosburg board is hoping that we'll have time to pull together a video presentation that she would give, basically introducing the budget and hitting some of the highlights of the changes and the movement of the tax rate, thinking that that a pre-recorded presentation where we hit some of those highlights might pre-answer a lot of the questions that people have. I'm certainly willing to help you, Jean Marie, with that if that's something you're interested in, or we can go into it with on the 25th and just roll with it.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but definitely something to sort of mull over. I feel like that would, it's sort of beating everybody to the punch. So yeah, I don't dislike that idea.
Okay.
I kind of like that idea, to be honest with you. Just because you know your turnout that you usually get, and having the opportunity, we know that if you release this video, a lot more people will watch it than will come to an informational meeting. So it feels like a promising idea.
Yeah, I like the idea too, if Jean Marie doesn't mind doing it. I think it saves a lot of time of people asking questions that, you know, can be answered pretty succinctly in a video. And I have one last question for you, Morgan. Do you know when the ER annual meeting is?
I don't yet, because we're having a little trouble herding those cats. I do know it'll either be the 22nd or the 24th. Those are the two dates, and we're just trying to get some clarity on which one will have more board members at it.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget or budget prep or annual meeting prep? Okay. I do need a motion to approve the Vermont Bond Bank Certificate of Completion for the Sheldon Elementary envelope project. I sent a copy of that in your packet. It just basically says that the project's done and we're using the school, but that's a document that the bond bank needs.
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Emily. So by roll, Lisa?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mary?
Yes.
Miranda?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And Emily?
Aye.
Thank you all.
So what I will do is I will email a clean copy of that out to all 8 of you. And if you could sign and scan, I just need to get at least 5 of you sending that back, but it's okay if they're on separate documents. So I think that's probably the most efficient way in these COVID times to get enough signatures. So look for that tonight or tomorrow. One other, but before I go to that, I did include some information on high school tuition payments in your report. I emailed earlier today the certification that we are planning to send out to schools that are not public or not the 4 quasi-independent schools, the 4 academies in Vermont. For you guys, that's namely St. J is where you have a few kids fetch up. This certification will start going out to every approved independent school so that you as a board are not in a position of prejudging any of them as being parochial or not. Those certifications will have to come back to us before we send any tuition payments out to the schools. There are 4 that are going to go out right away before we send second semester tuition payments. And then I'm anticipating there will be at least 4 that have to go out next year Although I think once this opens up, you can expect to see some kids attending schools previously they were not allowed to, or they were not allowed to bring tuition dollars to. So are there any questions on that or any feedback you want to give me on the form? That is something that Visbit worked with Pietro Lynn's office to craft, so it is legally in good shape.
Morgan, can you clarify the last piece you said? I mean, not about the legal jargon of the letter, but prior to that. The ruling now is that, yes, we would pay tuition to a school like Rice. You said there'll be schools next year that kids will be allowed to use tuition dollars for.
Sure. So right now it's just a preliminary ruling in U.S. District Court. And what that ruling says, and this is a very layman's interpretation of the document, but what the ruling says is that school districts can't just carte blanche say we're not going to pay tuition to a school like Rice. What Rice has the ability to do is to say, of the X $1,000 in tuition that we charge, this amount we can show is not tied to our religious mission or religious education at all. So they will be able now to send a bill for that secular portion of the education for any of your eligible resident students. So we will still go through the process of identifying which kids are yours based on residency. You will claim them in your enrollment figures, which will help your equalized pupils. But parents in the past who have sent their kids to Rice as an example and have done that without getting any money from NMV will now be eligible to do that.
Okay, thanks, Morgan.
And so we really have no idea how many students this might impact. There may be some who change their high school placement now that that's available to them, and there may be some that are there already that we just haven't known about because we've never been billed for them. And that would be true of any parochial school in Vermont or outside of Vermont. Any other questions on that?
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a guesstimate on the percentage discussed, or did you mention that, what the percentage could be? Difference?
We are going to have to get that from each of the schools. So if the school sends back a sheet of paper and they're willing to attest that 99% of their program is non-parochial, that's the number that we're going to go with. And I've not heard of any process where you as a board or the state would get to open up books to confirm that. But I suspect that, further down the road with further legal challenges, that may get sorted out.
Morgan, how do you, this could be a huge hit on a budget. We don't know these kids yet. Is there anything that's, yikes, that's concerning for next year? There's nothing in their statute that would soften that blow this first year, since we don't know those kids, we haven't found out?
No, because this isn't in statute, this is in the courts. So if, imagine if all those kids that were out there, say you had 20 kids at Rice and they all decided instead to go to Stansted, you'd be paying that. So this is just kind of widening the pools of schools that are eligible for this. My gut tells me that the bigger risk for you is losing kids from your public high schools to a school like this, because even where the tuition at a Rice is maybe lower than a tuition at an Enosburg, when a kid moves from Enosburg to Rice, Enosburg has fewer kids to divide their costs over. And so your tuition rate goes up, and it's going to go up more than any money you're saving on a lower tuition rate to another school. Anything else on that? Okay, the last thing I wanted to share with you doesn't require action. It's just that the feds are rolling out a second pandemic EBT benefit payment that will go to parents of students who are accessing free meals through the schools. We're still waiting for the last bit of guidance from the state, probably the feds. But at the moment, it appears that every one of our students will qualify, and they are doing a bit of a pre-screening to figure out which parents should be getting the benefit. One of the things that you may or may not have heard about from the first round is that there was a lot of family conflict in areas where there was shared custody about which parent got the money. And so most of those we punted to DCF, who was the agency on the ground for that round. They have made it clear this time that they want the schools to be on the hook for figuring that out. But there's a process where we're going to be reaching out to parents before any payments go out, and I'm getting a confirmation that the money is going to the correct household. So hopefully that will dull some of the complaints that that certainly we heard, and I don't know if any of you heard that from the first round. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you so much, Morgan. Try my video again, see how long this will last for me. So that brings us to board business. Our first item is setting any future agenda items. Does anybody have anything they want to put on the docket for next time? Don't all rush in. And then the schedule for the 2021 annual informational meeting, we have covered that, correct? Yeah, okay.
Right.
And
we will end up warning that as a board meeting as well, although I don't think we're going to bring any business to you.
Okay. Our next item is teacher appreciation. I don't recall who put that on the agenda.
Could I just interrupt for a second? I'm really sorry, Jean Marie. Could we go back to future meetings and just, may I ask when our March meeting is? For some reason, I don't have it in my calendar. And is it because of usually we have a town meeting and now we're not?
I have you on Wednesday the 3rd. Wednesday, March 3rd.
I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear you. You said Wednesday, March 3rd?
Wednesday, March 3rd, yep.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
Okay, teacher appreciation. Does anyone remember why we put this on the agenda? We certainly do appreciate our teachers.
You wanted to talk through, it's February, you wanted to talk through what your plan will be this year for teacher appreciation. I think this might have been Mary, and I think this might have been because of her past experience with sorting socks. It might have felt like it was urgent to talk about sooner rather than later.
I think you might be right about that. I know that in the past, as we've talked about teacher appreciation, the idea of working with some of the local businesses in our communities to, use their services to support our teachers has always been of importance. Mary, did you have any thoughts on this?
No, I really haven't been able to wrap my head around it. I do think it's good for us to start thinking about how we want to want to do it and whether we want to, I mean, we've talked in the past about in each particular town, supporting a business. I mentioned how we used to do it in Montgomery is we would rotate kind of through some of our small local businesses with gift cards and such, different restaurants, Sylvester's, so on and so forth. But then when we talked about this in advance of landing last year, before we landed on the sock idea, we did realize that in some communities, there are fewer businesses to draw on. And then there's that kind of lack of kind of consistency across the board with the 4 towns. So, I know that's why we kind of landed on the sock idea. I mean, which I think was great, other than, it was a logistical nightmare. So I certainly would not, there's no way on earth I would take that on. I chuckled, of course, when I got my wonderful card this year from the VSBA with the code. The sheer simplicity and ease of that process was, such a dramatic contrast to the absolute debacle of organizing the socks.
So Mary, will they not do
year.
that for us?
No, I mean, I tried really hard to get them to allow us to do that. I am not sure the leverage or sway that the VSBA has, but it's clearly more than I, because I had multiple conversations with the person at Darn Tough last year, and they just were not willing to do that, something like that with us. So
and I love the idea of supporting local, but I agree that not every town has businesses. And then this year in particular, I would want to be sensitive to giving something that, like, it shouldn't require somebody having to go out for those who maybe just aren't, going out besides going to school. Like, they might not want to go to a local business right now because they're really just staying put. So I like the idea of doing something that could be, accessed virtually or online or whatever I want to say. And I wonder if the sock place, if anything would change this year just because of everything that's so different now versus when you were doing it last year. Or when was it last year? Had COVID already started?
It was early on in it, but Mary, I wonder if there's anything, and it may not be them, but something similar where we would just have a coupon and they print out 200 of those, and then it's up to the teachers to go to Lenny's or wherever to get their sock fulfillment taken care of.
I mean, I'm certainly willing to reach out to Darn Tough again and, ask if they would reconsider the process. I cannot fathom a way that we, without something like a coupon or a code, we would end up in the same kind of debacle of last year's. And I mean, I spent like 3 days with Erin's help, who talked me off the ledge multiple times. So it was a team effort for sure. Someone else could do that if they have an abundance of time. I do not this year. I am willing to reach out to the woman I spoke with last year and see, explain that really didn't work. I mean, that order, I put it on my credit card and then got reimbursed. It was $3,000, give or take. I'd have to, 100% double check, maybe just south of $3,000. So it's not an inconsequential amount of money for us, for a Vermont business. And I know people loved their socks. I know I love my socks that I get every year. So maybe seeing how much, we ended up spending now that they know that from last year, maybe they would be willing to reconsider and work with us on making it more seamless and less time consuming.
Yeah, Mary, thank you. How many pairs of socks were they?
Hundreds, many
You
hundreds.
don't know how many hundreds of
I think
socks.
we have about 500.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's worth having a conversation now that everybody's used to doing business online, and you can reference the VSBA effort that, because I can't imagine, I'm having a hard time imagining that there are that many school board members, that this wouldn't be a bigger order, and why they could not do that. So
Well, and I certainly did reference, we've been getting the VSBA code for, years and years now. And I mentioned that last year to my contact there, but I agree. I mean, it'd be interesting to how many school board members are there actually across the state that they do this for with the VSBA versus the many, many hundreds that we did for across our districts. I'll reach out again and see. But I think maybe in case I get a hard no from them, we all may want to be brainstorming between now and March. If not the socks, then what? And I agreed completely with Catherine that it's really challenging to, people feel uncomfortable going out to dine and be out in the world. We have people have different levels of comfort. It would be nice not to kind of push people beyond their comfort zone with what we might do from local or regional businesses. There is something really nice about just being able to order something online from the safety of your home right now.
So Mary, I'm going to reach out to somebody at VSBA to find out who their contact is, and then I will give that information to you, because if it's a different person, that might help you.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. It may be different. I'm a little foggy on the details, but I think I reached out to someone at the VSBA last year and got the name of the woman at Darn Tough.
Okay.
And I'll have to go back into all my emails and I can find those names. But I'll let you know if I can't find the name of the person again and you have a contact at VSBA, or if you want to find out what magic powers VSBA has that I didn't last year.
Well, I'll let you go through your contacts first, but if you don't have any luck between now and our next meeting, let me know.
I will. Okay.
And I'll say if this is the route we want to go, because it still is a Vermont business, I don't mind taking the order on and doing that. I'll have some time, during some vacations because we can't travel anyway. So if that's the route we want to go, I don't mind tackling it, Mary, this time.
Erin, you are a saint.
I think we had an idea on how to make it better next time anyway.
Yes, and I would be willing to try to kind of break it down with you and where things fell apart.
I have to think there is something they can do. Like, even if they don't want to do the postcards, then can they just sell us 500 gift cards, and then at least we just disperse those, and then the people can just still make the orders themselves? Because to have to order all those socks, I mean, that is a huge undertaking, and that's insane you guys did it, and awesome that you'll do it again. But my God, I wouldn't think they would turn down that business, and they should accommodate it somehow. But
I think the issue with the gift cards, which would have been the super easy route to go, was they wouldn't discount that. They gave us a discount for number of socks we did, and they wouldn't discount gift cards, which was a bummer.
Well, let me work on it between now and March. I'll email the folks at Darn Tough who I worked with last year and plead our case for how can we simplify it and streamline it. Again, I mean, I think it's worth their while to work with us. That was not an inconsequential amount of money that we paid for that, all those socks. mean, maybe to a big company like that, $3,000 isn't a lot, but seems like a lot to me.
We could just get everybody Bernie mittens. Aren't they
Oh.
making Bernie socks?
I love it.
The other thought I had is, there's a lot of Vermont local businesses. So as much as we'd like to, keep it, say like a Berkshire business or a Bakersfield business, like if you just think of it as a Vermont business, that does open it up a little more. And man, like, if we were able to send everybody a $10 gift card to Lake Champlain Chocolates, or there's a million different places. So we can move on from the socks and from sock gate, as we called it. And then the next item, if I'm not rushing us along, is the teacher retirement acknowledgement. Was that in the same part of this conversation about gifts for teacher retirement? I'm guessing that's what that topic was.
And I think there's the idea behind that was just to make sure that, as we talked about, each school has their own traditions, but we just wanted to make sure that we were being equitable across the board, so that all teachers are being recognized equitably.
I wonder if the principals could just give us a quick refresher on what the traditions were at the local schools. I know, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Bakersfield, don't they give a Adirondack chair, or they did?
That's what I was told.
Yeah.
Are you talking about equitable, like something to recognize teachers at retirement from the board level? Are you talking about what each of the individual schools have done for staff when they leave?
The second, yes.
Okay. Lenny, do you want to say what Berkshire does?
I don't know if I can give a specifics. I think it's a little bit different depending on the individual. I'm trying to remember the last person that we had that retired. We kind of work on getting something that fits their hobby and lifestyles that they're going to be doing afterwards. But for oh my God, I can't remember her name right now. Yeah, for Kim Hall, she got a rocking chair, and I think there was some sort of collection of baseball related memorabilia and gifts that we got for her. I almost want to say we got her a ticket to a baseball game, but I can't. That one, don't totally quote me on that. But I think that's the conversation we had for that one. And then when Sally Pelkey retired, she's a little bit of a different individual as far as what she wanted. Morgan, as far as what she wanted, and she's a little bit more private. So we didn't have as big of a celebration for her, but we did present her with a few different gardening type related things. So I don't necessarily know if it would even make sense to want to have some consistency from building to building, because each individual has had a different impact on the school, and also what they want or need or what fits them is going to be different from school to school. But I thought the conversation you guys were trying to have was what is a consistent traditional gift the board could give to each teacher or to a teacher from any school. Because I would just say off the cuff, like I'd be uncomfortable with you guys putting limitations on what we think as a school is appropriate to give to our teacher that had been connected to our school for a long time, because it's going to be a different context school to school.
And that is definitely not where that conversation was, at least in my eyes, going. I think it came up last year, the year before, about, now that we're a merged district, looking at the teachers as a whole and just making sure it's fair, because that's not where it's going, but, just understanding what each school does. And I don't know, maybe the conversation's mute now that, we've all heard what it is and we just move forward. Because I didn't bring it up to change any traditions at all. I think that's amazing that you do it based on who you know. I just, I don't have any thoughts. I don't want to change anything that you're doing, because I think you're honoring teachers great in a great way when they go.
Sorry, I didn't answer because I got kicked off, but I'm back. And I think what I heard Lenny say was the same that we do at Montgomery, is we kind of fine tune it to the person.
In Sheldon, we always give a barn quilt. So we build one and design it, and someone in the school paints it, sometimes me, sometimes used to be the art teacher. I'm going to try to get her to take it over because I've had a lot to do in the past years. But beyond that, it really depends on the person.
So are we okay that we just remove that from our agenda item and then it's just school-based? And I'm fine with it. I know that somebody had brought it up to me and asked me to like investigate what's going on in all of the schools and to think about the equity across the board, but I don't see it being unequitable or inequitable. So I'm fine removing it from the agenda.
Some point the board wants to think about if there's something that you want to do, if somebody is actually retiring, you know, that's certainly a worthwhile part of the conversation if you want to engage in that thought process too. I do think, you know, the amount of money isn't maybe as, I think what I'm hearing from the principals, it's like the thought that goes into what's most important for that individual. And I do think I heard some traditions. I know Berkshire has had a tradition like Bakersfield with the Adirondack chair for a long time. And it sounds like Christie's got something similar, but it's a barn quilt instead of an Adirondack chair. But in terms of value, I'm not hearing a big discrepancy of the value there. So maybe you guys direct us if you want to think about something from the board to retirees.
Okay, I think that sounds good to me. Our next scheduled meeting is March 3rd. And is there any other board business that anyone wants to bring up? I'm going to take that as a no. And I think that at 7:58, it sounds like we are ready for a motion to adjourn. My video's all wacky and I can basically hear you all, but if I can get a motion to adjourn out of one of you, that would be great.
I'll make that motion. It's Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. And if you all wave or give me a thumbs up, I will take that as your agreement for adjournment. And I appreciate you all being here this evening and getting us done in a timely manner. And again, our thanks to Northwest Access for broadcasting us this evening. Thank you all. See you in March.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.